My name is Heath. So before we get started, I kind of just want to get a general sense from everyone. Who here has used Vim? Okay. How do you feel? Is everybody like thumbs? Are you comfortable with Vim? Like, okay, perfect. This is a good audience for this then. So over the last 8 months, I've gone down a pathway and started a journey that led me to Love Vim. And I'll get into that here in a minute. First, who am I? I'm Heath Naylor. I'm a developer at By the Pixel. You can find me on Slack at HeathN. We'll do more of that here in a minute. So basically, what I want to frame here is that this talk is for everyone. And that's not just every developer out there. We're talking developers, mathematicians, writers, students, and database and systems administrators. And if that's not you, then this talk is for you. Then it is for you. You can find a place for it. So I've heard all sorts of things as I've talked to people about learning Vim over the last 8 months. There's the fear and uncertainty of learning Vim that it's not for them or that they're not going to get it. That they learned a little Vim, but I don't want to sacrifice my productivity. It's not worth it. And again, into the effort to learn. And let's be honest, VS Code is better. And VS Code is wonderful, but we'll see here that it's not mutually exclusive. So the productivity thing is a very real problem. Not a problem, but something you have to consider. So I've heard Vim described as a learning wall. So you open up Vim and you're in what's called normal mode, and you don't know that. And you can't do anything. You can't even exit. So you're like stuck in this editor, and the biggest challenge is figuring out how to get out. And once you're out, you never want to go back in. Right? So I'm going to, over the course of this talk, demonstrate that this is less of a learning wall than you think, and we're going to get through that initial curve and get you using it and comfortable with it. Okay, so as far as effort is concerned, it's definitely worth it. You're going to start out like this and have no clue what's going on. And by the time you spend a couple of weeks with Vim, you're going to end up somewhere around here and know exactly what's going on. All right, so we want to take you here, maybe minus the one-hand typing. So, alternatives. You've got all your IDEs, you've got your other editors, such as VS Code and Sublime Text. All of these editors, and ones that aren't listed here, have Vim plugins that you can bring into your editor that you're comfortable with, and you can move around in Vim like you're used to in Vim, but you get all the niceties of your editor as well. So, my challenge to everyone here is going to be to use Vim every single day. It doesn't have to be all you use, but get in there and do something in Vim and get comfortable with it. Enough of a task that you can build yourself with it. The biggest key to this is to learn from those like me and like others that have done it already. So we're all familiar with Slack, and we're all familiar with Dimmer Devs. If you're not on Dimmer Devs Slack, absolutely get on there and join Topic Vim. I'll be in there, and you can ask me questions, and I will happily answer them. And there's a whole community of other Vimmers in there that will help you out. This is how I learned. They were great. So, like I said, I decided 8 months ago to use Vim. And I opened it up, and I was comfortable enough. I could use the arrow keys to move around. I knew how to get into insert mode with I, and I knew how to save and quit. And I was like, okay, this technically means I can use Vim, right? So then I just spent every day, and any time that I couldn't do something in my editor, or in Vim that I could do in my editor, I would Google or ask how to do what I wanted. And after about 2 weeks of that, I felt very comfortable in Vim, which I was surprised by. I thought it was going to be a much, much steeper learning curve. So use it every day and make them your own. So there's all sorts of RC files, VimRC files that you can take configuration from other people. If you do this, read through it, understand what it's doing, like every line of it. What I did is I just built my own over time. And now that I'm at this spot 8 months in, I'm considering taking from other people's and bringing it sort of into my fold as well. The nice thing about Vim is the configuration files follow you around TeamX system. So it's really not as much of a boundary as you would expect. So for the uninitiated, Vim is what's called a modal editor. This just means it has different modes that you can cycle through to accomplish what you want. So there's normal mode. This is what happens when you type Vim and you get a view and you're in there and now you have to decide what to do next or how to do it next. Insert mode is generally what you want to do next. You want to get in there and you want to start editing code, changing things, or notes or whatever it is you're doing. Visual mode is a way to select either parts of text, whole lines of text, or what's called blocks of text. And we'll get into that. And then the command line mode is what you use to interact with Vim directly and say, I want to save my file and I want to quit out and go back to my terminal. There's two other modes, select and X mode. We're not even going to talk about those. So those are more, from my view, more under the hoods. People use them to build plugins. You can get by just fine with the first 4 modes listed. So an important note is that Vim is not an IDE. They're fundamentally different things that can be used to solve similar problems. So that's okay, right? We've got our IDE, Vim, and on the IDE side you get things like your debugger, your terminal interactions, snippets, version control support. This is all baked in, it comes out of the box, and it's very nice. And Vim looks very different. You've got buffers and registers and these complex concepts that are part of Vim that you use to build out an editor that lets you do things an IDE does. I'm not suggesting you switch away from an IDE necessarily. I'm just saying try it out and see if you can bring things you like from Vim into your workflow. Vim doesn't always make you faster, especially when you're starting. You're going to end up slower. You're going to lose productivity, and that learning wall is going to feel like a detriment to your progress. Fight through that. It's worth it. So the mouse is optional, and that's okay. Sorry, not that one, that one. What that means is you can turn on, we'll go back to that, you can turn on a mouse mode and you can control the width of windows, or you can click to interact with drop-down menus and file menus. You can scroll up and down through text. It's up to you. You don't have to use it, but you certainly can, and I do. And then Vim is immense. It's not immense in size, but in functionality. So I probably use, I don't even know, maybe 5% of Vim, and it does everything I need to do, And I'm no expert on it. I'm 8 months in, so I'm still very young in it. So this is an example. We've got a project on the top that's PyCharm. It's got one file open and it's just as new. It's been around as long as my Vim session has been. It's taking 3.7% of my memory, whereas Vim and all of my terminal is taking 0.4. So I open up a few more files. Well, I've almost gone up a whole percentage, about 0.7%. Doesn't seem like a lot, but I haven't done a lot yet. Vim has only gone up 0.1. So if you're on a memory restricted platform, it's also, you got a knock-on effect of that. Or if you're like me and you have way too many tabs open all the time. So the core of this is that Vim is going to be a mindset for you. You're going to learn how to navigate through Vim and understand the core mechanics of Vim, and you're going to want to carry that everywhere you edit text. It's just going to, you'll find yourself copying text into Vim just to manipulate it, and then back into the browser, or you'll install browser plugins to help you do that. I've got a cheat sheet here. Don't worry about absorbing all this. It's a lot, right? But the resources at the bottom here, definitely go use this cheat sheet when you're getting into Vim a little deeper. This is past the tubing point. What you need to know is how to move around. So avoid the arrow keys is like the general rule of thumb with Vim. So you can keep your keys on the home row and you can keep the focus on just quickly moving around and editing code. This is not a very helpful way to look at it, so we'll look at it on a keyboard. So you've got H, which is the far left, J, K. These are the hardest ones to learn, but I've got a nomenclature for J, which is like jump down. It worked for me. K, I couldn't come up with one. It was the oddball out, and it was fun. L is on the furthest right, it'll move right. Counterintuitive, you think L is left. Not the case. So just think about it in terms of where your fingers lay. You'll notice J is where your index finger lays. It makes sense, you're not going to move back in text as much. And when you do, you're probably not going to use H. You're going to use something else. But moving right in text is pretty common. So those equate to the directions. So this is fundamental for being quick about moving small changes around, but you won't be using them most of the time. You'll usually be jumping to a specific line and then a specific point on that line, using a couple of other features. So the first thing, and this is like the bane of the existence of Vim, is a vimrc file. You have to configure the hell out of Vim. It's complicated in that way, but I keep mine pretty simple, and like I said, I built it from scratch and understood each line that went in it. So the nice thing is this is configuration in code. You put them in a dot file, you put it up on GitHub, you pull them down to any system, you install your plugins, and you're ready to go, which is pretty nice. Inside of mine, so on line 2 here, we have what's called an auto command in Vim. You can Google this later, I won't go into too much detail, but basically what it says is, when I read a file, or I start a new file, that is a markdown file, I'm going to set spelling on that. So Vim lets me know if I've got spelling mistakes anywhere in my file. And it's got a whole set of keyboard shortcuts that we won't go into to tell it, no, this word's fine, add it to the dictionary, so on and so forth. But you can bring this in, and you can bring it in specifically on one file, a type of file, or multiple types of files, or all files. So I've enabled my mouse. The N here just means normal mode. So anytime I'm in normal mode, I can use the mouse. If I go into insert mode, mouse goes away. The X term is just the terminal I use, and this whole chunk of code from 10 to 15 is just saying, hey, there's extra white characters in your file. I want to go ahead and highlight those. And this is just an idea of the thing you can do where if I'm editing code and I've got an extra space at the end of my function that doesn't belong there, my editor will let me know. You can get very granular about these. There's other ways to solve that problem as well. So plugins are essential to Vim. I thought when I first started, I wanted to be very portable and I wanted to work with just vanilla Vim. I was taught correctly that no, you should make Vim yours. And plugins are a big part of that. So the first thing I have here is boilerplate. So you'll see on line 5, we've got something called bundle. This is a Vim plugin to handle plugins. So you have to have the plugin installed and it'll install the other plugins for it. So you can see that on line 7, it comes first. It's called bundle. What you see here is, so for example, on line 7, the left part of the slash is, picture like the Git username, GitHub username. On the right is the repository. And it's basically that simple. If it's up on GitHub, and it's a Vim plugin that supports bundle, which most all of them support many, many different types of plugin managers, then it will go out and find it and download it for you. And you can download it once you, and this is more boilerplate here that's flashing. Then you can run command, plugin install, and it'll go down the list and install all the plugins for you. You'll do this once in a while, and then from then on, when I say once in a while, I mean like anytime you set up a new computer with Vim in your vimrc. And then every now and then you can go through and do a plugin update to make sure you're on the latest. Some of the plugins I personally use, vdebug is very good. So this is what attaches to my dbgp debuggers, so I can debug a bunch of languages that use that. I've got color schemes, so I can make my Vim look decent. And then, who here uses TeamX? Does anybody use TeamX? Very good. You can easily navigate between your panes and your splits using this plugin, and I'll show you that. It's wonderful. And then I've got an asynchronous linting engine that allows Vim to highlight my code, tell me what's wrong, tell me where it's wrong. And it's an excellent package. So we're going to dive into some of the core behavior of Vim and the core features of Vim. So text objects and motions are this idea that allows you to work with the text in the Vim editor in a very precise way and do exactly what you want with very few keystrokes. So the general layout here is all three of these are optional, but you can specify a number of commands you want to run or of text objects you want to run it on. So for example, we've got this string of text in a markdown file that says a very, very true statement that developed generates the best confidence. But we want to change the word best to something a little better, right? So a couple of ways we can go about doing it. We can count. So by the way, Vim always has a cursor. So the cursor starts at the top left. So this is going to be line 1, column 1, right? Now we can count over to best. So we know it's 5. So when we think about that number, 5 is what we're going to use. And then we're just going to move over 5 words. So that's W. And a lot of this becomes very intuitive, at least with the English language, to actions from your mind to the keyboard. So I just type 5W, and my cursor moves over to best. Okay, so now I'm here. What do I want to do with it? Well, I want to change that word. So I'm going to do CW, change word. Change the word. It drops me into insert mode. Ignore that escape. Didn't time it right. So it drops me into insert mode, and then from there on, I can type what I really mean, which would be greatest. And then I hit escape, and that drops me from insert mode back into normal mode. And this is the modal part coming in. So there's several ways to get into insert mode. In my case, CW, change, was the indicator that we were about to go into insert mode. All right, so keeping in mind the number, command, text object, or motion, it was kind of annoying to count how many words there were there, right? Like, picture that taking a lot of time. So what's a better way to do it? Well, I just want to find the word, or the letter B. I know I want to go to that word, and it has a B in it, so I'm just going to do F for find, B for the letter. And it moves me right to it. And then I just change that word, and then I just type what I want, and I hit escape, and so you can see the two lines basically, they appear at the same time, sorry about that. But see how the cursors are in different spots? The one on top is the insert mode. When you hit escape, it drops you one character back, it's just the behavior of Vim, and you're back in normal mode. A lot of the times if you're typing a command and you've sort of maybe not done exactly what you want, I just hit escape a few times just to make sure I'm back in normal mode. No harm in doing that. Okay, so let's look at a more realistic example. So say I've got a function here. This is written in Go. In Go, instead of it being request, they would like it to be one character if you can do it. It's the idiomatic Go way. So I'm going to change that. And also I don't want request to be a string. I want it to be some Go object. So I'm going to move forward to request. And then what do I want to do? I want to change everything inside of those parentheses. So I do that. Forward, or find, R in request, and then C is change, I is inside of the parentheses. And this is the Vim idea. It maps words to actions on the keyboard that just sort of flow into each other to accomplish what you want. So type that, and then I'm in insert mode, right inside my parentheses, ready to go. Very quick, didn't have to highlight text, get my mouse just right. So that's a very simple way to do that. So I just type what I actually want in there, which is R. Now I need to give it a return type since it returns true. Now there's several ways to do this. I can drop back out into normal mode from insert mode, and then that gets me to this state. You notice the cursor again drop back one. So I can do find space and append, Append is, it will put the cursor to the right of where you actually see it, and put you into insert mode. And I will put it to the left and put you into insert mode. So it depends on where you're heading, what you do. There's another option I could do. I could just move, now remember, L is not left, it's right. So you'll move right twice and go into append, or I could do the number, 2 L's, and then append, same as LL, append. Or I can find the curly brace and insert. So the curly brace is in front, so insert drops me back, and if I go straight to the space, append drops me forward to where I want to be. I encourage you to play around with those. For the most part, I use insert. I don't use append as often. So that ends up, you type in bool space, and then you're good to go. So it's a pretty straightforward path. It's a lot of keyboard shortcuts, but they become like a language, just like you speak to somebody. It's very, very simple after a few weeks. So let's go over the few different visual modes that Vim has to offer. So we talked about insert mode. Visual mode is, you got on line 3, our cursor on V. So from here, if I do Shift V, that's going to put me into visual line mode. It's going to select the entire line. Now, if I hit J, it'll drop me down to the next line and select the entire line as well. So this is if I want to get rid of multiple lines of code, or I want to copy multiple lines of code for any reason, I'll use visual line mode. You can keep doing that for as many as you so choose. Then there's just visual mode, and this is just V. So if I put V, I can then move over using either W for word or L for write, and select a portion of the text. Then if I hit J, it ends up selecting the entire upper line, and wherever I move it to on the next line. So it's for like highlighting sentences, paragraphs, stuff like that. You can use just visual mode, and that's just V on the keyboard. These also become natural over a few weeks. So the last is visual block mode. To be honest, hardly ever use this, but it's kind of cool. So you do Control V, drop down into visual line mode. I use this exclusively for commenting multiple lines right now. But you can see that I can select text across columns and rows, but without selecting the entire line as well. And I can put that anywhere in there. And then if I were to type X and cut that text, you'll see that text changes, which isn't very helpful in a paragraph like this. But inside your Vim, what we'll call a clipboard for now, you have the code that you took out. In this case, it's just the strings that we had selected. So let's talk about where those, well, let's talk about buffers first. So buffers are like a representation of the file you want to work with. So one file is equal to one buffer. 3 files means Vim has 3 buffers open. So let's look at an example here. So this is a file in Vim. Because it's a file in Vim, it's a buffer. If I make a change to this file, I'm changing the buffer. Until I save it, the file is the same as it was, right? So buffers are an in-memory store of the file. So if I say :buffers, that's a command there at the bottom, and I hit enter, we can see that we have one buffer. That's a text size on that. We've got one buffer, and the A there stands for active. It means it's the buffer that I'm currently working with that you can see. And it also tells me what file I'm editing and what line my cursor is on. Okay, so let's go ahead and open a new file as a buffer. :E for edit, or you can type edit. A lot of these shorthands also have full length words you can type out. I just use the shorthand for brevity. Now I'm going to open something called notes.html, right? So I hit enter, and up comes my buffer. Now if I say :buffers, I can see that I have 2 buffers. I have the active buffer is now 2, and then I've got 1 as well. So this is the general view of buffers. Now buffers have a ton of features. They have, you can list them with :buffers like I did, or ls, which is going to be familiar to anybody in the command line. You can go to the previous buffer with :BP. You can also map this to a keyboard shortcut, so you don't have to type BP every time. You can do buffer next with BN, and you can delete a buffer with BD. You can switch to any buffer by number. So :B1 would switch to buffer 1. Think of these like tabs in your editor. And you can set up your keyboard shortcuts to treat them like that as well. Yeah, so you can toggle between them. You can do a lot with buffers that we won't go into here. There's plenty of tutorials and resources out there for you to look up all of the in-depths on these. I just want to give you an idea of what's out there and what I use. One of the more powerful things that I use is splits. So this is one of my primary frustrations with an IDE, is I would want two panes next to each other, and I would want to be able to navigate between them and maneuver them, and it was always like I was sacrificing real estate to do this. And I was like, well, if I could just take this one view and just make it full for a second, well, now I'd have to like close the other one to do it. It was very painful. So splits just kind of solved that problem. So we've got one buffer, and now if we do :SB for split, it will split that top to bottom. And if I do, so now these are the same buffer. I can have cursors in two different places on the same buffer in two different splits. If I make a change to one of the buffers, it directly affects the other buffer, right? So I've got one edited, they're both edited. So let's go back to the unedited buffer. Now we can also vertically split this. So say that my split on the bottom is the active split, and I type vertical split, VSD. We get another split to the right. So this is pretty useful when you're editing a lot of files and you need to see them sort of next to each other to have some context maybe between them. If we type :Q, which is the quit command for Vim, it's going to quit out of a split specifically. It's not going to close out Vim entirely. You have to close all splits to quit Vim. So that's going to just close that one view, that one split that represents the buffer. If you type :BD, which stands for buffer delete, the whole buffer goes away. All splits close in relation to it, and you're back to your editor as it was when you first opened it. So that's the general idea that we have for buffers. And then we're going to talk about registers with them. So registers can be a bit complicated. I'm going to go over cursory some of the buffers that you don't touch as a person using them, and then we'll get into the fun ones that you can. So the first one is called an unnamed register. When you cut or copy any text in Vim, it goes into this unnamed register, and that's : also, double quote. Double quote also happens to be the key that you press to activate, to tell Vim that you want to start using registers. So if I want to paste whatever's in this unnamed register, I do double quote, paste. Kind of a confusing pattern for that one. There's also numeric registers that start at 0. They represent a log of everything you copied. So they go all the way from 0 to 9 in this specific order. So we populate all of them, and then the first one is the first thing you copied. And then the moment that you copy something else, whatever was in 0 goes to 1, and the new value goes into 0, and then so on and so forth. So you can have up to 10, just rolling history of everything you've copied in Vim, which can be very helpful. So if you want to paste out of the 0 buffer, it's double quote 0p for paste. You want to do it for 1, same thing, and so on and so forth. And you can see what's in those with : registers. And you can just see all the text that's in your registers as it is represented in your Vim session. So there's a few read-only registers that you generally won't even need to touch. The £sign and the %sign, if you notice when we were looking at the buffers view, those represent sort of positions in the buffers that you can move to. We're going to ignore those for now. And really, the most interesting one to me is the period. So Vim has a shortcut that if you just type period, you're going to repeat the last insert text change that you made. So if you go through and you have a JSON file, and you want to add a new property to it, you can do that in insert mode. You hit enter, you type what you want, you hit escape. Then you go down to the next entry, the next part of the JSON file, you hit period on the same line, and it'll do that same action again. And then you can combine that with macros a little bit later to really quickly parse through a JSON file and make a global change, potentially, if you need to. So the ones you'll actually be using are the named registers. And that's every alpha character on your keyboard. So if you want to copy whatever text is under your cursor into the A register, you do double quote A and Y for yank. Think of it as copy. Don't know why they chose yank. That's what they did. It's fine. So we'll talk about macros. Macros are triggered. You tell them that you want to work with macros by hitting Q. After that, you can select any of the registers to operate with them. So they're a direct combination. They're like a layer on top of registers. So if I want to start a macro in the A register, the moment I hit those two together, you'll see at the bottom it says recording at A. So it's going to put whatever you do next into A, the numeric alpha register from this point on, until you hit Q again to tell it that you're done. So in this reference to the JSON file, you could move down 5 lines, go into insert mode, type something, and then move down 5 more lines and do it again. And with that number operator, you can say to do that any number of times. So in that example, it would be, say you want to do it 5 times, so you type 5, and then at, which tells it you're going to run a macro. And then you specify the alpha register that you want to use. So it'd be 5 at A, and it would run whatever's in A 5 times. You can build those fairly quick. That one's a little less natural. You kind of have to hone that skill over time, but it's a very, very useful feature. In addition to all of those, you also have tags. This helps you navigate code via, like, if you want to dig into where this class is defined or what extended class is being used, you can dive in using tags. Tabs are like buffers, but it's a whole nother layer of complexity that I don't even touch. I used tabs at first, and I completely switched over to buffers because they fundamentally do the same thing without some quirks and some overhead. Sessions, you can save what you're doing in Vim and come right back to it, restore that session, and you've got all the same files open, all the buffers, all the cursors are in the same position. I don't use that either. I did at first, and it was just easier just to navigate to exactly what I wanted to do. Very rarely did I need sessions. And then marks. You can mark a position inside of any buffer, and then you can go to that position again after navigating away. Those are useful, and again, I use them sparingly. Usually with big files, they'll get used. So let's go ahead and do a little demo, because that's a lot of information very quickly, right? So we're going to cd into a folder. Oh yeah, I'm going to have to switch this real quick. Just a moment. Let's see how bad this breaks. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. How's this look? Okay, so we're going to make a directory first off. Directory, we're called Vim. Alright, and then we're going to touch the file called bbreadme.md, right? So I'm going to run Vim, type the file I want to work on, or I can just leave nothing. So if I leave nothing, we have the infamous Vim wall that is like, okay, I guess at least it tells me to type :Q to exit. That's nice. We're going to go ahead and hit colon. We're going to type E down here, or edit, and then we'll type the file. And I do tab completes all the time, so you can just finish that off. And then we're into the file. Now I can make a change. So that was oh, you know what? Let me turn this on for you. Oh, it's not working. Typical. Do you see it anyway? What do you mean? Sure. Here, let me drop it into. Perfect. Okay. How's the text size? Is that good? Okay. So we'll see back into that folder. And then we'll run this. Now, since I had it open in another Vim session, we're going to get this error. This is it just telling us that, hey, your file's already been opened somewhere. What do you want to do with it? I'm just going to edit it anyway with E. So inside of here, we can, so at the bottom here, this is every command that I'm typing. So you can sort of follow along with it as it's going. So first thing, I'm in normal mode. That you'll see once this disappears at the bottom here. This indicates where you're at. I will type I to get into insert mode. And then I'll just make the title, hello, Love Vim. And then escape to get back into insert mode. And then from here, you can do all sorts of fun stuff. I can hit 0 to go to, I don't know why I did that. To go to the front of the line. I can hit $, don't ask me why it's $, to go to the end. I can hit Shift-I to go to the beginning and drop into insert mode. I can do Shift-A to go to the end into insert mode and make all my changes. I can hit O to drop down a line and into insert mode and make changes. And you just learn all these things over the course of Googling and asking on the Denver Devs Slack channel topic Vim. Please join us there. And so these are sort of some of the concepts. Let's go ahead and do a visual node. And I can move a word at a time. Or I can move to the end of the line with the $. And you sort of learn to tie all these things together. And then I'm just going to yank everything under here into a register. So quote, I'm going to use A, and I'm going to yank. So now if I type out my registers, you can see that in A, which is right here, we have hello, develop Denver. And Q to quit out of that. We can select, so let's say that we want to yank this whole line, while I will yank the whole line, and I want to 5 times, actually I'll yank the one below it too. And then I want to paste that 5 times, so 5p. There you go. So that kind of gives you an idea of the sort of stuff that you can do. And then I can just hit period to do that again and again and again and again. You can use / to sort of search through things. And then you can use the semicolon to find the next instance. And on the line. So if I had hello here twice, semicolon, not working right now. Anyway. All right, so I think that's where I'll leave the demo. Do we have questions? Yes.
So I get caught in the read-only edit mode all the time, and I know it's just super light, but I just kind of go out and just delete the swap file.
Yep.
So what's the professional way to handle
that? So generally, if you just save and quit, so I'm going to save and quit this, and I'm going to list all this. And we can see that we've got that swap file. If I were to go to my other editor and say I were to properly quit out, it should, find out, be gone, which it is. So if you find yourself in a scenario where, and I'll do it, yeah, there we go. In a scenario where you do have this swap file, and you go to edit, it's going to prompt you for actions to do. I can open a read-only, I can edit anyways, or I can recover it. Let's go ahead and recover it. So we recover it, and we're in the file. Now I can save and quit, and I can list it. They kept it open, probably because I had this one open. I would have to close this one out. It's hard to actually get myself in a scenario where that stays there, but there's nothing wrong with deleting that swap file.
Okay.
If you have something in there that you really want, you recover it, and then you save and quit. And then it should clean itself up. Okay, so any other questions on that?
Is that swap file, is that the buffer?
That is pretty much, yeah, so let's do that real quick. So we're gonna open it up and we're going to, well, this is hard to do without being able to see anything. I did it. Okay, and in fact, I'm gonna type just ASDF in there. Okay, so if we list that again, and I run Vim on the swap file, we get this whole mess of like binary text. So this is not meant for a person, this is meant for Vim. If I search ASDF, we can see it down here at the bottom, and it looks like I missed some text as well. Wait for that to clear out. So yeah, you could go in here, I could probably change this and it would probably properly reflect in the buffer. But generally you just avoid going into that file. You either clean it up or recover it using Vim. And Vim knows how to read everything that's in there. So we'll remove that again. Anything else? We gotta have more, somebody's gotta have. Yeah.
Those registers persist across the Vim.
I have my registers set to persist. I think in Vim Vanilla they don't. So if you exit out and enter a new Vim session, you'll have different registers. I have a plugin that allows me to have them across Vim sessions so I can move between them without having to lose my registers. And that works for macros too. Anyone else? Yeah.
Super basic question about splits. You have 2 or 3 open. How do I switch between them?
Perfect. I'm glad you asked. Okay, yeah. So we're in there. We've got ASDF. And we split down and we split vertically, right? So there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can do a Control W and then a Vim move with H. Or what I've got is a plugin called the TeamX Vim Bridge, basically. I forget exactly what it's called. But it allows me to hook up keys like Control K to move up. So I can do Control K and now I'm in the upper buffer. Now, also, so let's close out of this real quick. QA. And I'm going to enter TeamX for a second. TeamX is a terminal multiplexer, and with it I can split my terminal as well. So in this top one, I can open up Vim, and then I can create a split and another vertical split, and then in TeamX I can also create a vertical split. So this is, and then, so see how my pane here, I've got mouse mode, so I can just drag this guy over, right? And then I've got mouse mode on TeamX, so I can just drag that up and down. And I can just move between TeamX splits, Control H, Control L to get to TeamX, Control J to get down to TeamX. It's very smooth and it's very connected. So that's sort of how you move about there. This is going to be totally preference, how you set up these shortcuts. Control W lands you in Windows type mode, and you can do window actions, like I can do Control W equals to make all my splits equal size. I can also do Control W O to zoom in on one. So then this is what I was talking about. One of my biggest frustrations with IDEs is I was always fighting for real estate. Well, here in TeamX, I can zoom in, and I can zoom in on splits as well. So it's very quick to sort of get everything the way I want, and then when it gets in a weird state like this, I just equalize everything. And it just kind of flows with me and moves with me. And it's up to me in my VimRC to adjust this if I want. So I still use IDEs mainly for like IDE-based features, like maybe the debugger's nicer, or maybe I need to refactor something and I like their tools better. But I do most of my development in Vim. Anything? Yeah.
So my primary use case for having multiple panes up is having different files open at the same time. What's a quick way to open up to do a split in Vim and not have the same buffer, have some different?
Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll delete that buffer, which gets us to one split again. And so say that I open up, let's create two files here real quick. So I'm going to touch another .md. I'm going to vim another. I'm going to say another. And then I'm going to vim readme, right? And then we're just going to say readme. Okay, so this is the spelling I was talking about. I'm just going to tell it it's good with Z, which is like the spelling keyword in Vim, and G for good. All right, so I'm in here. Now I want to create a split. So I'm going to go colon. We'll do SP. I want it below, space, readme, tab complete. There it is. Or I actually wanted, so I'm going to go ahead and close that split. I wanted SP, and then it was another. There you go. So it's just the same pattern as E. You can either specify a file. If you don't specify a file, then you're going to get that same buffer. And if I list my buffers, let me wait for that. We can just see I've got both there. If I want to switch to the buffer with the pound sign, so you see A is on 2. I want to switch to 1 instead, but it's also got this pound. I can just do colon buffer pound, and it switches me to that buffer. And you'll notice that's in that specific split. So I can do buffer previous, and then once you have more than 2 buffers open, if you have like maybe 10 or 5, you start to use these pointers like pound and % a lot more. Yeah.
Do you do anything with your environment to share between your clipboard and say like this would be a register in Vim?
Perfect. So that's one of the registers in Vim. So say that I've got lots of text, and I want to put this, or maybe it's a command, right? So I'm going to change to the end of the line, and it's going to be, ls-la. That's a command I want, but I want that in my clipboard. So I just go, so I can look, Shift F will look, it will find backwards from your cursor. So I'll Shift F to the tick, and then I will go into visual mode, and I will go forward to the next tick. And then I will access a special register that is asterisk. And that is basically saying that's your system's clipboard. So I go quote, asterisk, yank. Okay, so now from here, I can go over here and just paste. And I took the text, which I shouldn't have done, but you can do that. And so that's a nice way to sort of bridge the gap between IDEs and Vim and browsers and all that. And you can hook that up, like, so Vim has a concept of a leader key. So for example, I can hit the leader key, which is comma that I've set up, and E, and then V. I didn't do it quick enough. There we go. That's my VimRC file. And so in here, I can take this, copy it into my clipboard, go over here, paste it. Stuff like that. And then when I'm done, I just delete that buffer. And I've got an auto command, so when I save my VimRC file, it just refreshes it in all my Vim tabs. So it's very convenient. And you can set up a leader like leader C, or just copy whatever's under the cursor into that asterisk register. Anyone else? Yeah.
How long did it take you to get effective with this?
2 weeks to be effective. I've been using it for 8 months to sort of hone it into what I want. I still keep it pretty vanilla, like copying into my own clipboard, I still use quote asterisk Y. It hasn't been much friction for me to create a shortcut for it. So yeah, 2 weeks you'll start feeling good about it. Did you have one?
How good are you at Vim Adventure?
Oh yeah, Vim Adventure. I got good enough to get to the paywall. Yeah, and then I didn't continue. Oh, that does bring up a good point. You don't have to do this stuff alone, right? So say that I'm in Vim here. I'm going to go ahead and delete the buffers. I can't really see what I'm typing with this thing on, so. If you're in Vim, you can do :Vim, I think it's Vim tutor. Hopefully this works. Vim tutor is a command. Nope, it's actually Vim tutor out here. It's a binary all of its own. And it will drop you into a Vim editor that gives you all the information you need to work through it and figure out what you're doing. I didn't actually end up using this. I didn't know about this until I had already learned Vim. But I imagine that it's a really good way to learn. So Vim tutor in the command line.
Does that come with you if you have it installed?
That's my assumption. Yeah, I don't know. I would assume so. Any others? All right, that's it. Let's go to the happy hour.